Welcome back to another episode of Cobra Kai Companion, and I am Peter. At the top of the show, you probably heard the intro. Joining me today, my guest. This is the conclusion of the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So, welcome, Miki Yamashita.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I've been wanting to talk to you. Obviously, you're in one of my favorite episodes, obviously, because I love the Karate Kid Part Two. So we will definitely get into all of that, but I definitely want to learn about you and your culture. So um, I don't know. Are you like a Japanese American, or were
Yes,
you
so
okay?
I'm 100% Japanese. So both
Okay.
my parents are from Japan, and so in Japanese American culture, we would call that Nisei. I would be considered second generation. So in Japanese culture, we consider Issei to be the first generation that came from Japan to America, and so I would be considered Nisei, second generation. So that's what I am, second generation Japanese American. But because both my parents are from Japan, I'm genetically 100% Japanese.
Yeah, Nisei, I learned that term from watching videos of the 442nd.
Yes, yes, exactly. And the most decorated World War II regiment, and it's heartbreaking to know that they were overseas fighting for the United States, and many of their family members were interned
hmm
here in the United States. So, and although that's not part of my personal history, as a Japanese American, of course, it is something of huge importance to me, but because my parents came to the United States after far after World War II, so that was not a part of my family's personal history. But yes, that's pretty much how we identify ourselves. There are a lot of third and fourth generation Japanese Americans, Sansei, Yonsei, that I know, and it's been great to be an actor in Los Angeles and be a part of that community.
Now, where are you? You're originally a Massachusetts native,
That's
correct?
right. That's right. So I was born in Western Massachusetts, in a city called Springfield, and I grew up primarily in South Hadley, Massachusetts, which is a smaller town, a few towns over from Springfield. And I spent most of my childhood there. Although my father was a theology professor, and he would he would be able to spend his sabbatical, what they call a sabbatical year, where you have a year to continue your studies and teaching abroad. When he would have those years, he would take the whole family to Japan. So I do have some experience, some childhood memories of being in Japan and going to school in Japan. But primarily, I was raised in Western Massachusetts.
So, growing up, when did you're very, first of all, very talented, and you have
Thank
very many
you.
skills. I know that you do ballet and you're trained soprano and all this. When did you decide to get into these arts?
So when I was a very small child, my parents just saw me starting to want to sing and dance, and I would sing around the house so much, and they realized very early on that I had a very sincere and intense interest in the performing arts. And so very early on, my parents put me in dance classes and gave me piano lessons, and then I started singing in the church. My church happened to have, because my father's a theology professor. He's also an ordained minister, and we were very active in our local church. And our local church happened to have a children's choir. So I was able to start singing in school and also in church, and my interest in performing in the arts just kept growing from there. So I've been doing this since I was a little kid.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, the acting part, was that because you were already singing, at church and things like that, or was there like
So
yeah, go
I
ahead.
started getting involved in drama club at school, and we were putting on plays, and we were some of them were musicals, and so that was great because that enabled me to sing and dance and act on stage all at the same time. And musical theater, of course, became a core part of my experience as a professional. And so that was sort of the beginning when I was a kid of, putting on shows and figuring out, the kind of performing all those disciplines at once and all those challenges. I started taking him on early on, so it was a great. I was a part of the children's choir. I was part of at church, but also at like there were a lot of choirs, show choirs and concert choirs and stuff at school. So I was just involved in anything that was musical or theater related.
So, how does one go from, singing in choirs and plays to singing opera?
Right. So when when I was graduating from high school, there was some questions about, well, what do we want to focus on here? I had so many varying interests, and I was pretty good academically as well. So the question was, what do I want to do after high school? And I was accepted at New England Conservatory of Music, and I was very, very focused at the time. At the time, I really wanted to really pursue singing. I felt that that was what I was strongest at the time. And so when I was accepted at New England Conservatory, and that is a music conservatory in Boston, my parents wanted to encourage me to formally, in a college setting, study singing. So they encouraged me to do that, and so I I studied almost exclusively classical singing for the 2 years I was at the conservatory. So it seems unrelated, but it's actually classical training is as a dancer and as a singer and as an actor with Shakespeare and everything. That's the basis of what all theater is based on. So the classical arts is where it all began. So it wasn't too far of a leap for me, and I did learn a lot of incredibly important vocal technique that still helps me today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A couple titles that really stick out in your resume: West Side Story, The King and I.
Yes.
What were some of your favorite, I guess, performances that you were a part of?
I loved playing Maria in West Side Story because it's such an iconic role and the music is known to everybody, right?
Hmm.
So to be able to sing that music and play that role, it, uh, is it is just that was a huge breakthrough for me because I remember I was at that theater for the whole summer doing various other shows, and I did there. I wasn't expected to. I was supposed to just be in the chorus, and then something happened where they lost the person that was going to play Maria,
Oh my
and
gosh.
they said you're doing it, and I said, oh, okay. So I remember even then thinking, wow, this is a business that is about just as much about chance as it is about skill.
Yeah.
So that was an important role. Oh, and I've done many productions of The King and I, which is another iconic show, and I that requires a lot of classical vocal techniques. So that was a great fit for me too. And I've also done multiple productions of A Chorus Line, which also has a role in there that is a perfect fit for me. And A Chorus Line is actually about performing artists. So there were a lot of wonderful, purely lightning bolt moments in my career where I was exactly right for something and I had the skill to be able to execute it. And I
Is
was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, it was all chance. Now, is there like a production that you just that's on your bucket list that you really would like to be a part of someday?
Wow. I, I would love to do a show like Wicked. I
Okay,
mean,
yeah. Who
or
doesn't?
yeah. So I would love to be in a show that is that would be a challenge for me as a classically trained singer to kind of branch out a little bit. Uh, of course, because I had studied classically, when I started doing a lot of musical theater, I had to finesse the vocal technique so that it aesthetically fit more the musical theater genre. And then what's funny is that when I moved to LA and started singing with Los Angeles Opera, I had to kind of go back again and kind of reform technique wise a lot of the habits of musical theater. I had to kind of bring them back around because now I'm singing more classical music again. So it's been a total journey. But I guess I would say for as far as a bucket list musical, I would love to. I would love to do Wicked. I would love to do. Oh man, I mean, there's so many great shows, and but that's the one that I mean, like even something out of the box for me, like Hamilton or something. I mean, I would love I would love to start auditioning again for musical theater just to see what roles would fit me now in that arena.
Right. And as of right now, there's not a lot of productions or going on, right? With the
Right.
everything going on.
So
Yeah.
the pandemic really just made a devastating impact on live theater, of course, and so I think that I'm really hopeful that we're now coming to the end of this whole this whole year and a half of just absolutely no live shows. It was just terrible. But I think theater's going to come back, and I think it's going to be the last to come back. There's production of all kinds already going on now, in terms of film and television. But I think because theater involves a live audience sitting very close together, I think it's going to be a journey. It's going to be a
Yeah.
journey back, and I think we're gonna figure it out as we go along what this new what live theater is going to look like moving forward. You know,
Right.
I have a dear friend of mine, TJ D'Angelo. He and I worked in the theme parks together. That's another whole
Yeah.
area. But he's a good friend of mine, and he's an usher. So that's kind of one of the side hustles he does. And he said that people who come to the theater, like they'll put the ticket in their mouth and then take their gloves off and then like hand you the ticket, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of weird things going on that were unsanitary in the theater by audience, let alone the production, so
Yeah.
he's anxious to get back to it, but I think there will be more protocol and a little bit more formal procedure of like cleanliness and all that. But I'm hopeful. I really think theater has to come back. It has to. And
I think so.
I look forward to figuring out what that's going to mean for the rank and file performer like me. I do know that Broadway shows will come back, opera will come back for the tippy top, the big stars. Of course, there's always going to be demand for that. But I do really hope that the rank and file actors that work on Broadway and that work in live theater and also in film and television will be able to get a footing, after this whole terrible era is over.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because there's another production going on, the Karate Kid musical, and
I don't know anything about that. This is the first time I'm hearing about that.
oh, no kidding. Yeah, Drew Gasparini, I've interviewed him as well. He is the composer and lyricist, and it's been in the works. And I spoke with Robert Mark Kamen, who wrote the Karate Kid movies, and he is involved in it as well. I don't know like the capacity of it, but I know he's at least like some sort of consultant with, looking over this the lyrics and probably the script for the show. But we know very little of it, and that's kind of what we're waiting for is the lights to go back on, and hopefully some more news comes out of it. But
I I I can't wait. That sounds awesome.
yes, yes, it does. It really does. Um, So yeah, let's talk about some of the other things you have done. You were also on Law and Order.
Yeah. So when I was, so I, because I'm from Massachusetts, when I first started pursuing acting professionally, the natural move was for me to go to New York, right? And so I could still be relatively close to my family in Massachusetts, but still be in a big acting market, right? So, everybody's goal in New York as an actor is to get on Law and Order. Like it is the total brass ring, okay?
Okay.
It's just the thing you want on your resume so badly. So at the time that by the time I got to Law and Order, I had done all this regional theater. I had done, national tour. I was on the national tour of A Chorus Line. I had done many, many other shows, but I I made a conscious decision at one point because I could have gone on and continued doing different productions of The King and I and A Chorus Line for the rest of eternity, basically, But I made a conscious decision at one point. Listen, I'm not going to go out of town to do regional theater. I'm going to stay in New York and this, I'm going to work this day job and I'm going to try and use my theater experience and credits to break into television acting here in New York. And at the time, there was some decent stuff going on. There were soap operas there. Not just Law and Order, but other shows were there, right? So I just started. I just doggedly pursued it, man. And I just I would send letters and stuff and to casting directors of these shows. And at the time, there was only a limited number of casting people that were involved in television in New York. So I would just always just let them know what I was up to. If I got a commercial or I got something else or I did another show, I would always send them a postcard and let them know. And eventually I just broke them down and they kind of knew who I was because of all of the communication that I've been sending them about my career progress. And finally, I got an audition for Law and Order and I got on the show. And it was just my first real speaking role on television. And that was when I officially was able to say, "Hey, I'm on TV."
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of me establishing sort of a foothold in film and TV, and then things started rolling from there. Was able to get on all the soap operas there, and I was able to get on. I did a pilot for the Oxygen Channel, which at the time had just rebranded itself and was pushing more content with women of color, and so things happened. You know I wish I could say it all snowballed, but it kind of happened, at a slow but steady pace. And once I was able to come to Los Angeles, I already had credits on network shows, and that was important for me. So I was able to come to Los Angeles, which is the biggest possible market for actors, with some stuff on my resume.
Yeah, and how does one get on like Jimmy Kimmel and The Tonight Show with Jay Leno?
So they have in-house casting directors as well, and so when they're doing a certain type of sketch, or they need, like, a lot of times with the late night comedy shows, they need people who are celebrity impressionists, or they need people for sketches all the time. So they
Right.
have a casting director, and so if you're interested in pursuing sketch comedy, and you're doing that stuff on stage here in LA, those are the casting directors that you would target. And I used to, when I came to LA, I started doing the same thing that I was doing in New York, where I would just reach out to casting directors, and just start sending them things so that they would know who I was. And of course uh, you pursue representation that can officially kind of submit you to casting on your behalf when there's a role that is right for you. So
Mm.
you have to kind of go at it through different. In pursuing acting in Los Angeles is a little different, where you do kind of have to have representation, um, and I believe it's probably that way now in New York. And I haven't pursued acting in New York in quite a while now, so I can't. I don't know what the environment is like there now. But when I first started in New York, there was more of there was more. New York kind of respects people who are self starters, and
Mm.
so they will totally accept communication directly from actors. And I think in LA they do too, but it's there's just so many of us that you kind of do have to have official representation, an agent to represent you to casting.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
so I went through all those, I went through all that myriad of, jumped through all those hoops and all that. And by the time Cobra Kai came along, I had an agent that submitted me. But that was one of,
Ah,
the Cobra Kai thing. That was one of, I mean, I would say I, 50 to 100 auditions I went on that
oh
year.
wow. Wow.
Yeah, so you would be surprised to know how many uh jobs you don't get in show business, because
Yeah.
mostly only people, in the general public, only see the person that got the job,
Right.
and so they don't realize how much effort and time and labor goes into just getting into the room to audition. And that's a lot of times that's the win, you know
Hmm.
so to get the job is just like a miracle. It's like winning Mega Millions.
Yeah, that's the lottery. Absolutely. Some of our younger audiences maybe familiar with iCarly. That's a show that my kids watched. I watched a
Yeah,
little bit of it.
I heard there's going to be like a reboot.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. But I heard kind of some rumors about a reboot. But yeah, so so when I first moved to LA, I think that was the first credit. That was the first credit I got in LA.
Oh
Maybe
wow.
for TV. Yeah, maybe Jimmy Kimmel was around there too. But yeah, I mean, slowly you gotta it's when you look at someone's IMDb, it's like, oh wow, look at all these jobs they got.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of struggle in between.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a total miracle when you get something like iCarly that a lot of kids, like millions of kids, watch. And I recurred on a series called The Lion Guard, and that was an animated series, so it was only my voice that was heard. But The Lion Guard, which is a Lion King spin-off show that was on the Disney Channel, that has so many legions of fans too. And it's now on Disney Plus, but it
Right.
was originally on the Disney Channel. And I would get, there were friends of mine who had kids who were very young, they they would say, my kids are obsessed with the Lion Guard, and they would be so excited to see to that they knew someone who voiced a role, voiced a lion,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
Lion King lion. So yeah, it's there's a lot that of really hard work that you don't see actors doing that no one sees. There's a lot of training and a lot of auditions, and like, so when you see people who have a really significant career, it speaks a lot to their tenacity, and it speaks a lot to the perseverance.
Yeah, no, the Lion Guard was absolutely one of the other things that I was going to bring up. You voiced the character of Nirmala, and I watched a couple of episodes of it, and she reminds me of kind of a Miyagi type character,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
wise and
totally.
healing. Yeah, yeah. So, can you talk about like how you were able to kind of land that role and just your experience from filming or yeah.
Yeah, so I had a commercial agent. They were representing me for on-camera commercials, and they had a strong voiceover department. And they said, "Listen, we would like to start submitting you for voiceover. Is that something you'd be interested in?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be interested in it, but I have very little experience, so just so that you know that." And at the time, voiceover was kind of moving in a new direction, especially with animation, right? Where in the past, people would be able to cast, white actors in roles that were depicted as people of color, and they
Hmm.
were really wanted to move away from that and get a little more authentic and specific with their casting, which I applaud,
Hmm.
to
Absolutely.
give more, especially Asian American actors. Voiceover is such a closed, tight knit community that it is very difficult to break in as a new person. And so, and a lot of that closed, tight knit community is is not as inclusive like as it could be. And so I think that voiceover casting was moving in the direction of being more diverse and being more inclusive and giving newer people a chance, and so that the landscape of voiceover acting could look a little bit more like the way America looks.
Yeah.
And so so I got some opportunities early on to audition for things that, whereas normally they would just cast someone they already knew. So I was lucky to be able to get as many auditions to get my skill level in VO up to the level where I could be considered for major recurring roles on animated series. And there are a lot of regular acting skills that translate to VO. But what's wonderful about VO is that there are a lot of skills from opera that translates to VO, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
you have to have such specific, detail-oriented control of your voice, and that's all opera is,
Yeah.
so a lot of the skills I learned listening to myself and critiquing myself as a singer in such an intense way allowed me to be able to do that to my speaking voice and get that to express exactly whatever the script is, what the character is. And so I was able to get the role on Lion Guard, and that was such a surprise because I thought, wow, VO is just it's a whole quagmire in itself, and I'm amazed that I was chosen for that role because it was a pretty significant arc through season 3.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that they did not do a 4th season of Lion Guard because I think my character
I
would
think
have
so.
been a part of it somehow. But yeah, I'm thrilled that it's on Disney Plus and available for kids to watch now. And it was so surreal just to be able to see my voice coming out of a Lion King lion, you know,
Yeah.
which is so we're so used to seeing the renderings of Lion King lions. They're so iconic, and the Disney Lion King lion, you know, and the Lion Guard is basically follows the story of Kion, who is the son of Simba, and so the story continued, and to for me to be able to be a part of it at the time that we finished recording season 3 of Lion Guard, the live action Lion Guard was coming out with Beyonce. And so there was a
Oh,
lot of excitement, regenerating for Lion King at the time. So it was just an exciting time to be a part of that. And so I was so lucky that that all happened before the pandemic.
right.
So at that point, I was really getting, leaps and bounds of progress, just figuring out who I am as a VO actor, setting up just the technical aspects of my makeshift home studio, which
Uh-huh.
is still, it's always a work in progress because for me as a performer to have to deal with all the technical aspects of crafting auditions and recording good sound, and to be able to generate auditions with the frequency that I do, I was continually being able to just sort of set up what my VO home studio was going to look like. And then what was great was that was finally set up when the pandemic came. And so I kind of had a head start. I was a few steps ahead of other actors who had never done VO before. And then when all of television production shut down, the only thing that continued was voiceover.
Hmm.
So I was really lucky that I kind of had that experience and enough know-how to have a home like a somewhat of an acceptable home studio,
Yeah.
to be able to continue voiceover during the pandemic when there was nothing else going on at all. Um, so so I was very, very fortunate that I was able to continue that throughout this last year and a half.
Yeah, that is amazing that and and it's nice because you don't necessarily have to go to a studio, right? And you could just do it
Yeah, I
there.
recorded jobs. I mean, it
Hmm.
was nerve wracking, but I was able to record professional animation jobs from my home, which that, I mean, that never would have been
Right.
something we would have considered, pre-pandemic. I would have gone to a studio where everything was set up exactly the way they wanted,
Uh-huh.
and then I would just come in and do the performance. And then, but yeah, I was able to record jobs from home,
Yeah.
and so that's what is that's what there are a lot of growing pains associated, with the pandemic and dealing with it. But I am so proud that I was able to make that work,
Yeah.
and I was able to also give a lot of solid advice to actors who decided when the pandemic happened, well, I want to continue acting, and I might as well just start figuring out figuring out if I can pursue voiceover. So I was able to give a lot of advice to actors who were new to that space, which
Hmm.
is great.
Do you have a preference? Like, because you've done so much. You've been talking about VL. There's the performing arts, and you've been in front of the camera. Which of those do you feel more passionate about one over the other, or?
I'm really excited about the prospect of going back to pursuing on camera
Mhm.
acting. Um, I think that just like theater, it's going to take a while to figure out what the new established normal is going to look like. We're doing a lot of actors are doing a lot of what we call self taping,
Mhm.
and so we're doing a lot of auditions that would have normally pre-pandemic been an audition you would physically go to. A lot of those are now auditions that I have to tape myself at home on camera, and and for me to produce a VO audition is pretty easy. It's a pretty simple process. But for me to produce an on-camera audition from home is a little bit more involved. And so I'm experimenting, just like I did with my voiceover studio at home. I'm experimenting with different lighting and different audio and like ways to make myself look more professional. And every actor's going through this right now. But I am excited about, I think what I'm most excited about is going back to pursuing on-camera episodic television and film acting. So that's what I'm hoping will resume for me very soon.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, as productions are starting to kind of get back up. So you're based out of LA,
Yes.
right? Okay. So Cobra Kai films in Atlanta. I think most of our listeners know that. How you mentioned you have representation now that was able to get you there, but is that something?
I think that they tried. I think that so what Hayden and Josh and John Hurwitz told me on set was that I think they tried to cast my role locally in Atlanta at first, and then they decided to also, and then I think at some point they decided to also see actors from Los Angeles, and that's when I came into the mix. So that was an in-person audition, and that was an in-person audition, of course, because it was actually before the pandemic.
Right.
But yeah, so once they started, I think they did try to cast it locally, but decided to see actors from Los Angeles. So I was able to go to Atlanta to shoot, and then when I think back at it now, it was the fall of 2019, right? Mm-hmm. That's when I shot. And then they were telling me on set it was going to be on, at the time, the show was on YouTube. You know what I mean? So
right, correct.
So it was a YouTube Red or YouTube Premium show. And so they said it's probably going to be dropping next summer. So June of 2020. And I thought, wow, that's kind of a long time, but okay. And I was just so thrilled to be on the show. I was just so excited. I was like, whenever you put it on, I would be there with bells on. So excited, So I just thought, okay, great. And then, of course, at the time I was, all those things we took for granted. Oh, I'm just flying to Atlanta to shoot this thing and then coming back, and then, no masks, no nothing. I just you just travel around freely. Everything's, fine. And that was the last time, I think that was the last time I traveled before the pandemic happened.
Oh, wow.
So then the pandemic happens, and then YouTube, it's announced, I see a deadline that, YouTube's not going to move forward with Cobra Kai. And I'm like, wait, but does that mean no one's going to see what I did? Like, I was kind of confused at the time because I thought, wow, that would be so sad if I didn't know what was going on. And eventually I found out that they were basically going to move the show somewhere else. And so that process took many months. I guess while the pandemic was going on, and I of course have no control over that. So I just have my fingers crossed that I just was hoping it would turn up somewhere. And then of course it went to Netflix, and I was just thrilled because that I thought, well, this is just such a fantastic development because I didn't do anything, and now even more people are going to be able to see Cobra Kai, starting with the season I'm in.
Yeah.
So it all worked out fantastically. And I
would say that.
My whole involvement with the show. I have to say that there was a lot of, unexpected twists and turns in what was happening. But I'm just so amazed and thrilled that I got to be a part of something so ingrained in people have such fond feelings for the original Karate Kid movie, I remember when I was a little kid and like the movie comes out and all of a sudden everybody gets that Japanese stuff is cool. And like, I just was so thrilled by that. And just to see Japanese culture and Japanese tradition celebrated was just so thrilling for me as a person of Japanese descent. And then to have that be a part of my consciousness growing up, and then to like then I become an actor, and then I get to be actually a part of something related to this, and then I'm acting with Ralph Macchio. It's just like the whole trajectory of Karate Kid being a part of my consciousness as a kid, and then eventually me becoming a professional performer and being a part of it and acting with Ralph Macchio. I mean, all of that is just a miracle to me. And I'm just so thrilled that so many people love these characters so much.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed at the amount of love that came out, came out to really celebrate this story and these characters. And when the show debuted, it was just, people went crazy. I mean, in the beginning of this year, when we were still in lockdown, when the show came out, and people just, I mean, I've never been in something that like that many people were excited about, honestly. So it is just with the pandemic happening, with all the really difficult struggles that we faced, in this country as that was unfolding, to just have something joyful like Cobra Kai come out while we were in the deepest part of the lockdown it was just great. I mean, my whole being able to be involved in this show and with these characters and to see Ralph Macchio in person and then act with him, it was a total miracle.
Yeah, I living vicariously through you for sure. The Karate Kid Part 2, was that one that you watched growing up at all, or you mentioned the first one?
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't even tell you when I was in Atlanta on set, I got to meet Tamlin Tomita. Now, she and I were not in a scene together,
right?
They were shooting her role on the same day, and so I got to actually meet her. And so to have seen Karate Kid Part 2, years earlier, and then to see her and to have her actually, to me, she's a huge star, right?
Yeah.
Joy Luck Club. I mean, like that movie was such a huge moment for Asian American women. So to me, she's a huge star. And so I was very careful. I was like, like with Ralph Macchio.
Sure.
Macchio came and introduced himself to me. I'm always of the err on the side of like, don't speak unless spoken to type of thing, like with more established actors when you're on set. So I was kind of quiet, and like, I was just kind of like very, very admiringly kind of looking at her. And she came over and introduced herself to me, and she was so supportive and encouraging. And she's just such a great champion for Japanese American actors. And so even though I wasn't acting with her, it was a total surprise that I was able to actually meet her and talk to her. And we actually had dinner after that day of shooting. So I got to get to know her a little bit, and that was just fantastic. So
sure, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think of her as someone who has really with the amount of experience that she has had in the industry as a Japanese American woman. I feel so. I feel kind of kinship with her, and I was just enthralled that she took an interest in me, and that she, she's just been such a supporter. whenever she sees other Asian American actors. So that was a just such a delightful surprise that I got to, like, really spend some time with her. So it was
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
So your character of Ren is the one who, greets Daniel, tells him kind of what's happened after the events of the Karate Kid Part Two. Was your dialogue pretty much what was on paper? Was there any, alternate lines or takes, anything like that?
There, there were, so the script that I auditioned with was different than the script that was given to me when I got the job. The
Interesting.
story was the same, but there were a couple of lines that were different, right? So then when I got to the set, there were a couple of lines changed again. So there was Jersey Mike's was, I think, the line that I ended up saying, right?
Hmm.
And then there was a there was something else. There was something I there was some other, the two restaurants I mentioned are like, we're different,
I see.
and they changed it to Jersey Mike's on the set as we were shooting. So like, I can't remember exactly what the previous mentions were, but yeah, we tweaked it. They tweaked it a little bit as we were rolling. So
That's interesting because honestly, I'm not even sure how big Jersey Mike's is. We have one location actually right near where I live. So if it wasn't for that one, that reference would have gone over my head. Like I would have been like, Jersey Mike's, okay, so that's a restaurant, like. But I do know it's a chain, obviously. But that was just kind of interesting that was the change in the dialogue.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, the whole scene is so funny because seeing it's like he just doesn't want, everyone thinks of Japan as having these, like, very, you know, of these old structures and these beautiful temples, and like Okinawa has these beautiful traditions, and so to see his him be so disappointed that everything's been modernized and stuff.
Right.
It's just a funny scene, and I just loved it. I love Cobra Kai because it really shows you that there can truly be dramedy. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
there can be
absolutely.
hilarious moments, but also it can be so touching. And when he goes to Mr. Miyagi's grave, I totally cried. I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
even kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
It's so heart wrenching and so touching. So yeah. I mean, I just love being part of. I just love being part of a show that gets comedy and also gets drama and also gets action.
Yeah.
It's the best of everything.
Yeah. It really is. It has something for everyone. You have the legacy characters, as they're called, the ones that we grew up with, and then you have like this new generation of kids that the kids of today can relate to.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that there's a lot of very young teenage actors on the show. They're doing incredible. I mean, I really admire them because those action sequences are really involved.
Hmm.
Um, and they carry a lot of weight acting wise on the show too. Um, so I'm so glad that because of them, a new generation of people can, you know, have their interest piqued in these characters, and then hopefully they'll go back and see the original movies too.
Oh, absolutely. It is kind of funny because like when we did interview some of the younger cast like earlier on, they had mentioned, yeah, never saw the Karate Kid and well got the role and maybe now's a good time to watch the movie.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, kind of interesting how that happened.
I'm so glad that they were able to flash back to the actual scenes in the original films. I mean,
Right.
that's just amazing to be able to get to be able to work that out, from a legal perspective, let alone, let alone being able to work that creatively into the current show. But it's just so beautifully done, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, as we get ready to wrap up, there's one other thing I kind of wanted to bring up and have you just kind of shed some light on. You had a post on your Instagram, Leah Salonga, I believe, right? Is that how you pronounce her name? She mentioned in an article that you wrote about Asian American women and basically in Hollywood, and I believe it was possibly the lack of representation or the difficulties of landing jobs.
Yes, was this about the Little Mermaid?
You know what? I did not see the
And
article. I only saw the
I
post.
think, yeah. So I'd written, so there was a national tour of The Little Mermaid that went out before the pandemic, and in the Ariel, uh, the main character was an Asian female actress, and and I think she experienced a lot of unfortunately a lot of
Backlash.
backlash
Mm-hmm.
because people expected Ariel to not be Asian American, and I wrote an article about the need for basically the need for inclusivity and to be able to reimagine a lot of the more established theater intellectual properties in a way that allows for more opportunities for actors of color. And I think, and Leia Salonga read the article, and she shared it, and so that was a wonderful moment for me because I look up to her very much. She's a musical theater performer with a lot of, I mean, she's a Tony Award winner, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she's a very high stature star in musical theater and someone that a lot of Asian American performers look up to. And so I was thrilled that she read my piece and also was able to share it. So that was thrilling. That was exciting. I wish I could do more writing on topics of inclusion and diversity in the arts, but I feel like it's just as important for me to go out there and actually get involved and do my part as an actor to be seen and to be heard. So
Yeah, absolutely.
so there's a lot. I mean, I could start a blog or a podcast or something where I talk exclusively about those issues, which I think are really important. But I'm hopeful because I think the landscape is starting to change. I think Asian Americans are becoming more visible in mainstream film and television, and of course, I'm constantly auditioning for like nurse number two or like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's still a struggle to get to not be the character that helps tell someone else's story, but to be featured and to be to have our stories told too is very important. So so I love Cobra Kai because it really starts to tell those stories, of Asian Americans and just celebrate Asian culture. And so I definitely I'm so lucky that I got to be a part of something that celebrates Asians. And I mean, it's still May. It's still
Yeah.
Asian
Yes, it
American
is.
Pacific Heritage Month. So I'm so glad I got to be on your podcast during this very important month for Asian American artists and celebrating our history
Yeah,
and all of that. So.
absolutely. And I mean, thank you for coming on to share your stories. Is there something that you might be able to promote or something that maybe we can look out for that you're working on?
Well, my social media handles are Miki Miki 410, Miki 410 because I'm 4 feet 10 inches
Yeah,
tall.
my wife has the same height.
So yeah, I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter as well, and I always put my I always do announcements there for the things that I'm working on. I'm recurring on an animated series right now, which I don't think I can talk about quite yet. But
Okay.
I play multiple characters over multiple episodes of this new series, and I hope I think it's going to come out in the fall.
Oh, awesome. That's yeah, that's just a few months away. So
Yeah,
very excited for that. So yeah, I follow you. So definitely give Miki a follow to get all the updates and I share things like that in my stories too, when I see them. Um
cool.
just kind of get things out and because I after speaking with somebody, I try to follow you guys' work, and if I get a chance to watch something, I will definitely do that, just because you just never know what you might miss out there, like the line guard, for example, like if
Yeah.
not maybe for this interview, maybe somebody doesn't they wouldn't have checked that out, but I'm a big fan of The Lion King, and when I saw that you did voice a character, I was like, "Oh, I got to watch a few episodes at least, to kind of see what this character's like." And like I mentioned, kind of like a Miyagi character, So
Right.
I hope people go check out those episodes of yours. So those are your socials. For anyone that still has not yet followed us, I'm on Twitter at Cobra Kai Pod, on Instagram at Cobra Kai Companion spelled with a K. So I want to thank everyone for listening, and if you enjoyed this installment of our AAPI Heritage Month series, we have, I believe, at least four others that I interviews that I have spoken to AAPIs about their heritage and culture. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next time.